The Battle of Marathon, a defining clash in ancient military history. The Battle of Marathon, 490 BC, stands as one of the most significant and dramatic encounters in ancient military history. It was a clash that marked the beginning of Greek resistance against the Persian Empire, which was by this time an unchallenged force sweeping across the ancient world. What made this battle particularly remarkable was not only the outcome, but the context in which it occurred. The Greeks, against all odds, emerged victorious over a much larger force, shaping the future of Western civilization. The Persian Empire under King Darius I had long been expanding its dominion across the ancient world. By the early 5th century BC, Persia had already conquered vast regions including Asia Minor, the Levant, and Egypt. Greece, with its collection of independent city-states, stood as a thorn in the side of the Persian ambitions. The Persians had a particular grudge against Athens. The city had supported Ionian Greeks in their rebellion against Persian rule in 499 BC, and although this rebellion had been swiftly crushed, Darius had long held a bitter resentment toward Athens for its interference. Seeking revenge and to expand his empire further westward, Darius decided to punish Athens and its allies. His decision was, in part, influenced by the Greeks' earlier victories in the Ionian revolt, which had humiliated the Persian Empire. To this end, Darius ordered an invasion of Greece. His forces, vastly outnumbering any Greek military force, set their sights on the Athenians, who would bear the brunt of the Persian assault. Darius's invasion force was massive. It consisted of tens of thousands of soldiers, most notably including the elite Persian immortals, a highly disciplined and fearsome corps of warriors. The Persian fleet, with its well-trained crews, sailed across the Aegean Sea, making landfall at the plains of Marathon, a strategic location about 26 miles northeast of Athens. This location was chosen with precision, for it offered a flat expanse of land suitable for the deployment of the Persian army. The Athenians, knowing they had little time, gathered their forces in a desperate bid to halt the Persian advance. Despite the dire situation, the Athenian leadership was confident in the courage of their soldiers. They were led by the general Miltiades, a man with significant military experience, having fought in several key campaigns. The Greek force, predominantly Athenian, was a fraction of the size of the Persian army. Estimates vary, but the Greeks fielded around 10,000 soldiers. This was composed of hoplites, heavily armored infantrymen who fought in tight formations known as the phalanx. These hoplites were well-trained and battle-hardened, but they were not prepared to face the overwhelming Persian numbers. The Athenians were also joined by a small contingent from Plataea, a nearby city-state that was loyal to Athens. The Greeks were fighting for their very existence. They knew that if they did not stop the Persians at Marathon, Athens would fall, and their entire way of life would be crushed under the iron heel of the Persian Empire. In a city-state like Athens, where the concept of democracy was being born, the implications of defeat were dire. Their society, their freedom, their culture, and their values would all be lost. But there was a deeper reason the Greeks fought. The invasion of the Persians was seen as a fundamental threat to their identity as a people. Athens was home to some of the earliest democratic principles, and the Greeks, despite their internal rivalries, were fiercely protective of their autonomy and way of life. The Persian Empire, in its authoritarianism and vast control, was seen as the antithesis of everything the Greeks stood for. As the Persian army landed on the shores of Marathon, the Athenians had little time to waste. They quickly fortified their position, waiting for the inevitable clash. Miltiades, realizing the weakness of his position, knew that if the Greeks remained static, the Persians would inevitably crush them under sheer numbers. Time was not on their side. In a bold move, Miltiades decided to take the offensive. He recognized that while the Persian army might be overwhelming in numbers, they were not invincible. His plan was to strike fast, exploiting the weakness of the Persian infantry, who were not as well trained in hand-to-hand combat as the Greek hoplites. The Greek strategy was to stretch their forces across the line to give the appearance of a much larger army, hoping to outflank the Persians. As the battle began, the Athenians charged toward the Persian lines in a desperate bid to push them back. The Greeks moved with terrifying speed, using their powerful shields and spears to form a tight, impenetrable wall. They pressed forward in a wave, their relentless assault driving the Persian lines backward. The Persians, unprepared for such a fierce attack, began to waver. The Greek phalanx, a formation of hoplites locked in close quarters, allowed the soldiers to fight with unyielding strength and discipline. Though the Persians had superior archers and cavalry, they could not break the tightly packed ranks of the Greek soldiers. But it was on the wings that the battle turned decisively. Miltiades had strategically weakened the center of his lines, drawing the Persian forces inward. The Greek forces trapped the Persians between their phalanx in the center and their encircling wings. What followed was a massacre. The Persian forces, realizing they had been outflanked, began to disintegrate. The Greek forces, now with the momentum on their side, slaughtered the Persians as they attempted to retreat. The Persian soldiers, many of whom were not trained for close combat, were utterly unprepared for the brutal tactics of the Greek hoplites. They were trapped, and there was no escape. The Persian fleet, which had been positioned to provide reinforcements, could only watch helplessly as the Persian army was annihilated. With their forces shattered, the Persians were forced to flee back to their ships. The victory was resounding and unexpected. The Greeks, against all odds, had crushed the mighty Persian Empire at Marathon. The battle cost the Athenians dearly, with many soldiers killed or wounded, but the loss to the Persians was far more devastating. Estimates suggest that the Persian casualties were as high as 6,400, compared to just 192 Greek dead. The victory at Marathon had far-reaching consequences. It was a turning point in the Greco-Persian Wars and a decisive moment in the defense of Greek civilization. The Persians were forced to abandon their plans of invasion, and the Greek states, emboldened by their success, began to prepare for the next Persian threat. But the victory was not merely military, it had cultural and psychological ramifications. The Greeks, especially the Athenians, had shown the world that the might of the Persian Empire could be defeated. The idea that free men, fighting for their homeland, could overcome the forces of tyranny and despotism would echo throughout history. In Athens, the victory at Marathon became a symbol of the power of unity, of the belief in democratic principles, and of the strength that could come from defending one's freedom. It was a moment that not only shaped the course of the Greco-Persian Wars, but also set the stage for the rise of Athens as a dominant power in the ancient world. The Athenians would go on to build their empire, creating a lasting cultural legacy that would influence generations to come. Despite the glory of victory, the Battle of Marathon also served as a harbinger of the brutal struggles to come. The Persian Empire would not relent. Darius's son, Xerxes the Barbarian, would return to the Greek mainland 10 years later with an even greater army. Though the Greeks would win again at the Battle of Salamis and later at Plataea, the specter of Persian dominance would continue to haunt the Greek world for years to come. The Battle of Marathon, in its dark truth, served as a reminder that victory in war does not come without cost. For every hero celebrated in the annals of history, there were countless unnamed men who bled and died on the battlefield, their sacrifice obscured by the passage of time. The Greeks, though victorious, were not untouched by the grim